Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Paris Schutz. A former president, a Manhattan prosecutor, a political campaign. History was made this week. Former President Donald Trump indicted in New York for hush money payments to porn star Stormy Daniels. Back home, the runoff election is now just days away as Bernie Sanders stumps for mayoral candidate Brandon Johnson.
If you let them cheat, they're going to win. And that's not acceptable. Are you going to let them cheat? No!
Meanwhile, former Alderman George Cardenas uses an unproven Trump-like trope about mail-in ballots at a Paul Vallas rally.
I play the long game. I'd rather have just keep me on and use me and use me.
The curtain is pulled back on former Speaker Mike Madigan's patronage operation as the ComEd 4 trial barrels forward. And in sports.
Swing and a miss, the White Sox come into Houston and knock off the defending champions.
Opening day wins for both the Cubs and Sox as the new fast-paced era of Major League Baseball gets underway. And now to our Week in Review panel. Joining us are Craig Dellamore of WBBM News Radio, Dana Kozlov of CBS 2 Chicago, Rick Pearson of the Chicago Tribune, and Dan Bernstein of WSCR 670 The Score. Thank you for trudging here in the rain and the wind. Rick Pearson, Donald Trump, arraignment expected Tuesday afternoon. How do you expect this is going to go?
It's going to be very interesting to see the purple walk, and I think it's going to be nonstop TV coverage on Tuesday.
Helicopters.
The whole 9 yards. I mean, we basically know about Tuesday because of not only from his attorney, basically confirming the indictment, but also the fact that you've got the Secret Services meeting with the New York Police Department and making arrangements for how to work the courthouse in Manhattan on Tuesday.
So, Dan, will you be watching for like a spectacle, Republican congresspeople out there with protesters?
I find the spectacle at the moment, frankly, remarkable to see how many Republicans who could even be running against him or who had previously staked out not full never Trump, but post-insurrection positions to say, maybe we need a new standard bearer because we've been losing a lot and his candidates have been losing. His poll numbers have been eroding, but man, you see them snap back like iron filings to a magnet when it becomes something like this. And it's just, his sway that he continues to hold on this party against their better political judgment, to see it happen right in front of you is remarkable to me.
Well, you even have the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy saying it's a witch hunt, that they're going to hold the Manhattan DA accountable, Dana Kozlov. How can lawmakers credibly say these things when no one has actually seen the charges, no one has seen the evidence, no one has seen the facts?
Well, it's just rhetoric right now, and it's more of what we've been hearing, for the last many, many years now. So, of course, you can't, how can you say you're going to, first of all, how can Congress hold the DA in Manhattan accountable? First, that doesn't even make sense, but it's just rhetoric, and so this isn't surprising.
Completely separate units of government,
yeah.
Federal and state. Craig Dellamore, Paul Vallas jumped on this indictment right away and was pretty tough on Trump.
Well, obviously the candidates who are running right now are going to, but what's struck me is how many big-name Democrats are actually holding their fire. I talked to Dick Durbin earlier today, and he was very measured. Instead of crowing, he said, the first thing I want to do is make sure people understand that the former president is innocent until proven otherwise, and that there is a process that has to be gone through. And and I asked, what about those people who are saying this is a political prosecution? And he said, that's a question I can't answer.
Well, this is part of a playbook, though, that the Democrats, Joe Biden was asked about it 4 times today. They're not going to answer. There's no gain here. Let this play out and watch it dissemble on the Trump side.
But could it also be indicative of concern they have that these charges aren't the strongest charges that are out there against President Trump when you have all these other investigations?
You're talking one word, indictment. If it's indictment, that's a big enough word. It doesn't matter what the underlying charges are. That's a major, major thing. So, but the fact that Democrats are taking the sit-back, very judicious approach is part of the strategy.
Because it came first. I think the historical context of the first former president to be indicted, that is significant. It just so happens this is tawdry stuff. And whatever the New York law is, these particular charges, as opposed to directly interfering, trying to find votes in Georgia, or causing people to storm the Capitol and or putting false slates of electors together, it just so happens that I think that this playbook makes sense if they're waiting for something that feels more meaningful, with more historical gravity than checks cut to Stormy Daniels.
And remember, the second you display any sense of glee on the Democratic side, you give ammunition to the people who believe it is a political prosecution. So they're going to hold their fire, I think, through much of it, if not all of it.
So how does this play into the Chicago mayor's race? I mean, we mentioned Paul Vallas' response, Brandon Johnson. Paul Vallas, by the way, there were some comments unearthed where he was on the radio calling some investigations against Trump a witch hunt.
Yeah.
Well, but this is, again,
That was the second impeachment.
The second impeachment. But again, this is kind of the question we've all been asking is, who is Paul Vallas? You know, and the dancing this tightrope of aligning himself with more to the right-wing types, like going on right-wing talk radio and espousing, you know, calling Pritzker and Lori Lightfoot dictators over their executive orders on COVID, basically saying, fighting the governor, opposing the governor on the masking orders in schools, saying that that should never have been done. Then you have, you know, and then he's got the, well, I'm a lifelong Democrat, you know, behind that. No lifelong Democrat is going to go on these right-wing talk shows. They're not going to show up on Jeannie Ives' podcast out in Wheaton, okay? That's not what a lifelong
Yeah, these
Democrat
commercials for
does.
Paul Vallas, the word Democrat is like every third word. Remember, I'm a Democrat.
Right.
But on the other side, Dana, you've got stories this week about Brandon Johnson, who has all thousands of dollars in debt that he hasn't paid, water bills, traffic tickets. Are these blows likely to influence these on-the-fence voters?
I mean, if you're on the fence, potentially. If you really are truly on the fence, it could potentially raise questions. I actually talked to Commissioner Johnson today about those very concerns, and by the way, they are all paid up.
Yeah.
They are
according
paid
to
up.
him.
As of today.
Yes, as of today. He didn't want that, as he called it, to be a distraction. But I mean, I talked to somebody earlier this week who made a very good point and said, I think more voters are undisclosed than they are undecided. That could be very true. But I do think if you are on the fence, truly on the fence, something like this is absolutely something people could consider, because legitimately raises questions. Well, if you want to manage a multi-billion-dollar budget and you have some potential, even past issues with your own fiscal responsibility, that may not sit well with the undecideds, but how many undecideds there are, hard to say.
Well, and especially being an untested person when it comes to everything that's facing the city budget and budgeting times ahead, and pensions, property taxes, those kinds of things. If you don't know fiscal management in your own household.
And opposition has tried to make the case that he is making $175,000 a year as a union organizer. Why would you have these outstanding bills? You're running for mayor.
You wonder how he let it get this far, but it might be because he thought, all right, I'm on a payment plan, paying a little bit of money, and maybe there's little or no interest on it. You know, he may have thought, I'd already took care of it. I would have thought, if I were running for office, and I never would, I would have straightened something like that out ahead of time.
I may or may not have a couple of parking tickets I still have to pay. So, you know.
What was that about undisclosed?
I'm disclosing it right now. I'll pay it off ASAP.
People may relate to
Well,
that kind
I was
of a
going to
struggle.
say that too, that there might be, on the obverse side of that, of people who have had trouble
And
paying
that's what
their
he
bills.
said today. He said, listen, you know, with student loans, with mortgages and having a young family, I'm not unique to Chicago families, but most Chicago families are not running to be the mayor of Chicago.
And not making $175,000 a year. That's not a bad income. Meanwhile, Dan, you have the FOP president, John Catanzaro, saying there will be... All right. What do you really think now?
I already know I don't.
So he said this week there will be blood in the streets if Johnson wins, citing what he expects to be an exodus of cops. Vallas denounced those comments right away, but I mean, foot and mouth disease here for Catanzaro?
That's what he does. I mean, nothing like that from him surprises me, and that connection with Vallas is gross. It really is, and it makes it very difficult for there to be any kind of alliance or perception of alliance that shouldn't be taken extremely seriously, to be in bed at all with somebody that fringe and that extreme and frankly that awful. It doesn't reflect well for reasonable citizens of this city.
And this is what you said, Rick. Who is the real Paul Vallas? Has he played both sides here, wanting police endorsement, but then trying to distance himself from their leader?
Exactly. In the same way that, you know, he's gotten money from people who have been Trump supporters. You've got the money that entered in from Betsy DeVos's PAC and as an independent expenditure kind of thing. And, you know, but he denounces Trump or you know, the indictment, and everybody should be held accountable to the, you know, that kind of thing. It's been this constant of being asked about these kind of dalliances with the Republican kind of side, and it's not like he actually definitively answers them. He just stays on message, and that's been his strong point throughout this campaign.
Yeah, but Brandon Johnson stays on message too.
Well, but Paul, I've known Paul for 40 years. Paul is a word salad in a spinning bowl, okay? He is doing the best job ever on staying on message, and everything outside of crime is a distraction that he's not going to
He's got a national heavy hitter, Joe Trippi, running his campaign, and I wonder if that's the influence there. But Dana Kozlov, at the end of the day, would you expect that public safety, crime, will end up being the primary motivators for voters, as polling has showed?
Yes. I just think that that is the number one issue on everybody's minds right now that lives in Chicago, and potentially people who even want to come into Chicago to work. I do think ultimately, but it's also about, I mean, they're so diametrically different, right, the way they want to approach public safety. So I really think it's going to come down to public safety being the number one issue, but which course of action do you believe is the right one to try to get crime under control? Short-term versus long-term is one way to look at it as well.
And to the effect, the Northwestern University put out a poll this week, Craig, showing the race neck and neck, and that only a slight majority of white voters supported Vallas, a slight majority of black voters supported Johnson, Latino voters are kind of up for grabs. So all those who predicted this is Bernie Epton versus Harold Washington Part 2, not so much.
No, except that in some ways it is. It's just that I don't think we had accounted for, or the pollsters account for, how many different factions there are out there. There is a split among the voters between those who want more law and order and those who say we've got to do something different.
It's not coming down to race. It's not the white folks want the white candidate.
I wasn't using race.
No, I'm not. But folks were saying this would be about race, like Bernie Epton and Harold Washington.
And it hasn't really been that, although I think Johnson has been trying to make it more like that and has been injecting comments about when questioned by people where he doesn't like the question, he says, why are you giving that question to a black man? So
there's a subtext, too, that is inescapable, in that it's clear that these policies from Vallas would continue in large part to perpetuate an us against them construct, the two Chicagos. And if Johnson is finding traction for something other than that, and some of these long-held, long-proven, more cops, flood the streets, keep those people away from us, if he is getting traction there, that's a big deal. If he's able to pitch the idea of to fight crime, fight the despair, to fight crime, help people and build them up and give them alternatives rather than just trying to protect yourselves from them.
Well, it seems like the fault lines here really are ideology, not race so much or not income so much, but if you want a stronger police presence versus you want a more progressive approach to this is where the fault lines are falling down.
I think there's just a wariness on behalf of a lot of Chicagoans just about weariness about crime. And that transcends anything as far as race. I mean, there is that element that just, we got to do something.
But and also,
I mean, there is that. I'm saying there is an element.
And you have to do something sooner than later.
Right.
Not you have to do something and hopefully in 10 years it'll work out. I think there's a big faction of people who are concerned about how long certain plans will take.
Hasn't worked.
Yeah. I mean, that's
that
what
hasn't. We know what doesn't work, and beefing up the budget and making this cop city hasn't worked.
I'm not saying that that's my opinion. I'm saying I think that there are a lot of people out there, and I do think it comes down to ideology, though, who might be concerned about how long it will take, you know?
But remember, though, people who are afraid are more motivated to come out and vote than people who are dedicated to doing something different, and that may be.
Well, and also I would say too, let's remember age and how this plays into this, okay? Because, you know, older voters, most dedicated demographic going to the polls, as we saw on the February 28th. Younger voters,
They were almost not there.
They were almost not there, and that's certainly a major source of a needed vote for Brandon Johnson. Vallas, and I think here Jesse White was perhaps one of the most critical endorsements that Paul Vallas got, because that helped kind of transcend this of an election being about racial issues, and that here you have a, you know, venerated elder statesman of Illinois politics who happens to be black, but kind of providing that this is a safe signal that you can vote for Paul Vallas.
That's a huge point, the age point. That is huge, you know, because, I mean, there's such a different way of thinking. I know I'm speaking in generalities, between folks who are under the age of 30 and arguably folks who are over the age of, let's say, I don't know, 55. I mean, there's a very different way of thinking about what is the right way. And so turnout in that regard could be a huge
Paul
deal.
Vallas keeps mentioning Dawn Clark Netsch. He learned from Dawn Clark Netsch, which might mean something to older voters, but probably not much to younger voters. Craig Dellamore, would you predict that we're not going to know the results on election night, given all the mail-in votes here?
I still think that, I think it is going to be a very close election, and if that is the case, then yes, we won't know that night. But this election has been so surprising in so many different ways, and we may see that people, depending on what the weather is like and everything else, on Tuesday, we could see a big surge, and it could end up going one way more than the other. If the teachers union gets its people out and they're really dragging people to the polls, that could change the dynamic.
Hopefully they're not literally dragging people to the polls, but they're helping.
Although some are accusing them of doing
Some are accusing them of that, absolutely. Meanwhile, Rick Pearson, city council members got bitter at each other this week over a vote to expand their own power, expand the number of committees, and then take away the power of the mayor to appoint committee leaders. What's this all really about?
Well, one, you have a great deal of turnover going on in the city council.
Yes.
I'm with 17 members.
Yeah, I think
roughly.
there's going to be 14.
Okay.
There are 14 runoffs.
Right.
And then they've got new members. Yeah.
So,
16 for sure.
Yes.
We're going to be new no matter what.
And plus, you know, that new blood, it reflects a tiredness of having the mayor control over council committees, over chairmanships, over those kinds of things. I think it's more of a liberating kind of using this new mayoral, whoever it may be, using that as a new starting point for all kinds of great antics in the council.
Yeah, and I think what they're afraid of is that if they wait until everyone is sworn in, a new mayor could just start making promises and
cutting deals.
Yeah,
so they're trying to preempt that, because this has been a primo carrot in the I was going to say a tool in the toolbox for the mayor. I mean, to win over influence and power by handing out these committee appointments.
Yes, but this is going to be a very different city council, so they don't want to wait for more progressives to come in, and there will be more. There'll be more Latinas ever in the council than before. So there are just so many new energies that are headed that way. They want to get their ducks in a row before then.
All right, well, prosecutors want to get their ducks in a row in this ComEd 4 trial, Rick Pearson, which is still going on. It's going to be going on for a week. So catch our viewers up on the highlights this week.
Well, basically what we have is the chief mole for the federal government testifying, the chief mole executive at Commonwealth Edison, who took
Fidel Marquez,
who took a plea bargain agreement that he would testify in return for no jail time. And he's been outlining the various ways that Commonwealth Edison, through the top kind of henchmen around Mike Madigan, the favors that the company would do to make sure that Madigan was taken care of, and that the company would be continued to be looked at in a favorable light for what they
How did he
wanted.
say this undercover video that he shot of you saw there of Jay Doherty, who was one of the folks indicted? How did he get that video? And what is there a bombshell here? Is this a smoking gun video? There's Mike McLean in one of the other videos.
Unless you consider pizza at Saputo's a smoking gun. I mean, which I won't
We
go-
learned what they
I won't
like on
go
their
there.
pizza at
Yes,
Saputo's.
that's right. But I mean, it was the feds who obviously had set up the cameras for him to wear, and that's why the pictures are kind of weirdly shaped. But what you have now in the last couple of days is the defense attorneys now trying to cut down his story, basically saying, you know, the fact that you were offered no jail time in return for your testimony and pleading guilty to a crime, isn't that a bribe? So we'll see how that plays with the jury.
Interesting turn there by the defense attorney, obviously making good money to come up with arguments like that. Let's move over to sports. Dan Bernstein. Cubs and Sox win. The Cubs game was 2 hours, 20 minutes. Very breezy. Is this going to be the standard this year for the MLB?
It seems like it. Yeah, if they keep these rules as currently constructed and enforce them the way they have, get used to it. And if you need a bathroom break or if you need to go stand in line and get a hot dog, make sure you are listening to the radio broadcast or watching on the app, because you're going to miss a lot.
So are fans, are players, coaches, are they cool with like the pitch countdown clock? Are they cool with all these changes?
It seems so. I'm sure there's some guys grousing about it here and there, but these are the rules. And this is how they're going to play, and everybody has to play by them. There's going to be some mistakes. But based on what Theo Epstein has said about all of their research and experimentation, looking at the affiliated minor leagues that use this, they know what the first several weeks are going to be like. They're going to get a large sample size of data. They're going to talk to people and be willing to tweak around the edges of what's best. But so far, so good. There was a new record for stolen bases that was set for the first day, and stolen bases.
Right, because a pitcher can't throw over to first more than twice.
No, the bases are bigger, and it's actually the distance between them is cut down now. And right, a pitcher can't just throw over multiple times. Just the very pace of the game. They've stripped out all the stuff we don't need.
So Rick,
I
a
love
traditionalist like Rick, you love it.
It is for traditionalists.
It's 2 hours and 23 minutes. Let's get back to baseball. Let's get back to playing, not goofing around and outside the batter's box and trying to psych each other out mentally or whatever. Get in, throw the ball. And it's nice
Someone
to see.
say that is baseball.
And it's nice to see a base hit up the middle.
It's not just mental, it's physical too. The idea is to not give some of these end-of-game high-leverage relief pitchers who throw everything max effort all the time the chance to rebuild their video game power bar for the next explosive action. It's get it and throw it. And what's happening is all these guys who are throwing 102 miles an hour at max effort are going to need to be in a different kind of cardiovascular shape. They need to budget their energy better to be able to get it and throw it.
And this might not give the same advantage to the pitcher that they've had, and obviously MLB wants more offense. But is this the cure to their ailing ratings and their demographic problem? They are losing younger viewers, aren't they?
Yeah, I don't know if this actually is going to bring people to the park. I don't know if a young fan is. They're on their phones anyway. Like the idea of sitting. If any of us who have kids of a certain age and have had them know that even 2 hours and 20 minutes of rapt attention at a thing is asking an awful lot.
Unless they are baseball players themselves.
Correct,
And
but
maybe
even
they'll
then, it's to the phone to look at stats, to call up fan graphs, to look at baseball
But adults are
records.
going on the gambling sites basically. So I mean, everybody. Dana, are you more inclined to go to Wrigley Field and watch a Cubs game? Now it's gonna be shorter.
Well, first and foremost, I am a Sox fan.
How did I get that wrong? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
But I'm not a hater. I'm not a hater. I'm married to a Cubs fan. I don't know yet. I mean, Dan, you might have changed my mind. I was against these changes. I love baseball. I like the slower pace of it. We'll see. I'll give it a chance now. I'll watch a full game and I'll check back in with you.
All right. As to the substance here, have the Cubs bought themselves like a moderate contender here with Dansby, Swanson, Bellinger? Is it?
If a lot of these acquisitions end up in the 80th percentile of their performance probabilities, sure. I think a winning record at the trade deadline, fringe contention at the trade deadline that would be enough to add a little bit, count that as a big win. They have spent some money, but they don't have a great player. They have a lot of better players.
Right.
But the way champions are built, you're talking about 3 5-win players. Swanson's a 4-win player at his 80th percentile. Nico Horner's a 4-win. Ian Happ is a 4-win. So they could be good. I don't see a roadmap for them being great.
And maybe they're developing some of those players like Brennan Davis.
He's
perhaps
hurt.
Oh, so he might not be a factor.
He's got a back problem, so it does. He's got a little bit longer. But the decision that they made with the Horner contract was interesting, with the 3-year window of that. We'll see what they do with Happ, and some of the length, the terms of those deals will tell us maybe what they think about when they're really going to be good.
All right, folks, the term of this show is expired. We are out of time. Our thanks to Craig Dellamore, Dana Kozlov, Rick Pearson, and Dan Bernstein. And that is the Weekend Review for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Weekend Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. And join us tonight at 10 p.m. for Chicago Tonight. And now for the Weekend Review, I'm Paris Schutz. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe out there, and we will see you at 10. So, Craig, what is your assignment for election night?
I will be in the studio, basically talking about what we're hearing from our reporters out in the field, and with Robin Robinson, formerly of Fox 32, will be our analyst. So
she was involved in Alderwoman Sophia King's campaign.
Yes, she was.
Yeah.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm that's proud to serve its community through pro bono legal services.
Tonight's about Joni.
Join an all-star tribute to Joni Mitchell, recipient of the Library of Congress Gershwin Prize for Popular Song.
Kind of thrilling.
With Brandi Carlile, James Taylor, Annie Lennox, Cyndi Lauper, Herbie Hancock, Ledisi, Graham Nash, Diana Krall, Angelique Kidjo, Marcus Mumford, and a surprise performance by Joni Mitchell.
Tonight at 8 on WTTW.
Next time.
It is an extraordinary achievement.
After a miniature village is opened, a man is murdered.
It would appear that poor Joe knew his assailant.
Father Brown thinks Tiny Kembleford may hold the key.
Maybe the murderer is using the model village as a sort of map.
But Inspector Sullivan is back and doesn't want his help.
I see you've lost none of your recklessness, Father.
Father Brown.
Saturday at 7 on WTTW.